everyone. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'm going to try to really recap an idea that I've already talked about, which is the fractal nature of our universe, but especially to talk about the fact that the entire universe could actually exist in just one single photon. So it's an idea that I've had for quite a while, but it's just very hard to explain explicit. So, just keep in mind, bear with me and keep in mind that this is really an open brainstorming session where I don't know exactly everything that I'm going to talk about, but I'm just going to let this flow and see if it all makes sense. So, feel free to comment on this idea, and hopefully it'll be interesting for you. So, let's start first things first. In many of the previous videos that I've launched, there's this idea that basically there's this circle that represents nothingness or void that enters into a spontaneous kind of vibration. The problem is, since this process happens infinitely fast, and since for every vibration you have a vibration of opposite phase, this cancels itself out, comes back to nothingness, then vibrates again, and unavoidably, because of a process that I explained if you check my other videos, which I call God's Game. It's kind of a circular story at this point, where the state of source, God's source, or the universe, is a infinite flickering or infinite switcheroo between a state of nothingness, pure potential nothingness, and a state of vibrations that spontaneously appear. And of course, since information can be represented in vibrations, just like music can be represented in vibrations, but technically any and all information can be displayed or converted into a vibration, that means that everything and nothing coexist at the same time. It's just that there's no structure or no experience. And since God's source, one of the other rules that I've kind of figured out is that it hates repetitive and especially circular stories or experiences. Oops, what have I done here? Yeah, so no circular stories. It always has to invent something new. So here's the dilemma. Imagine that you're in a state where a vibration is created, but since for every vibration there's a vibration of opposite phase, they cancel each other out, and you're back to nothing. How do you break out of that? And in my mind, that's where you went from, say, one dimension to 2 dimensions. And I'll show you a video which sort of shows this process. So here's a video that I found on Facebook. Basically, it's a bubble. You can see that there's a bubble here between 2 loudspeakers that are vibrating at a certain frequency. And here's the magic now. Observe the surface of the bubble, what's happening. If you look closely, you'll see that there's a vortex or a spin that is initiated on the surface of the bubble, which means that at a certain frequency, the interaction between 2 waves that are being played by these 2 loudspeakers make the surface of the bubble spiral. So So in the visions I had when I had my revelations, so to speak, this is how you go from sound to light, quote unquote, or from the Om sound to, light. The way that I drew the photon, which is kind of the break from one dimension to two dimensions, is a form of black hole that has waves wrapped around itself and that spin in opposite directions to each other. What did I draw there? So a self-contained kind of black hole where waves are wrapped around themselves and around a black hole. What did I draw there? When you add spin, actually, imagine if you added spin to linear waves. Imagine if you add spin to it, or torque. That prevents this kind of superimposition, for a time at least, where a wave meets its wave of opposite phase and then cancels itself and then goes back to nothing. So it's a strategy for source to have an experience which is simply giving a form to a vibration or information, preventing it from canceling itself out for a moment, for a certain period of time, and have this experience where there is no experience prior to that. There is just beingness or existence, but there isn't experience. And by creating the photon, which is this kind of structure, you finally get experience. And if you look closely at what I've drawn there, what it actually looks like is Nassim Haramein's torus structure. Just look closely at this image. It's really, you can see that it's this kind of circular movement of, you could even say that those are already vibrations that are wrapped around a center in a toroidal fashion. And therefore, thanks to this, by adding torque to this, you avoid the superimposition of waves. Here, there's no spin yet. Now there is spin. Yeah. So this kind of torus, the toroidal structure of the universe, to me is the fundamental. This is a torus. To me, the photon is a torus already. Now, what happens then is something very mind-boggling, and this is where I get the idea that the whole universe can actually be in a single photon. This process of nothingness sort of entering into a vibration, where does it happen? Where? Everywhere. There's no reason why it would happen somewhere and not in another place. It happens everywhere. And since you cannot have a finite kind of somewhere, and it's all infinite, so space is infinite, or empty space is infinite, then you could say that photons, these kind of photons, simply pop into existence simply out of sheer randomness of waves interacting in such a way to create this pattern. Just like the video I've shown you with the two loudspeakers at a certain frequency, it will create a spin. And so you can have several photons that just pop into existence. at distances which can be infinite. The distances between them can be infinite. But then what is the nature or the characteristics of that photon? And don't forget that since this process of vibrations appearing infinitely fast in the void, this photon theoretically contains within itself an infinite number of vibrations. And so it has inside of itself, it's this quantum nature of things, that it has inside of itself every single possible characteristic or how should I say this? Well, individual information of all possible photons contained within one photon that flickers between all possible states it can be in, all possible states, infinitely fast. And if you think about the implications of this, it means that inside that one photon, if you stretch it out across what we would call time, and you'd plot every single possible state of that photon across time, and you would sort of arrange that into a grid. You'd like bend it over like this and arrange it into a grid, which would be just like your computer screen, and you'd plot each photon here and its state across time on the screen of that computer. This means that since that process goes infinitely fast, it is the same as if you had a full movie with all of its frames and all of the things that happen in that movie, and you display that infinitely fast on a screen, on the monitor of your computer screen. This means that all of reality exists simultaneously, because ultimately, if that photon contains all possible states, there are random states where the entire, you take a single frame inside the story of the universe that we're in right now, and if that photon flickers infinitely fast between all possible states, that one frame can be one frame that appears instantly out of the void and is replaced by another frame, which can be something completely random. And just like if you'd ask your computer monitor to display random images, random pixels with random colors assigned to each pixel. In that randomness, there will be our reality. There will be real images that appear out of this randomness. But there's a kind of a sorting mechanism for, getting rid of all of the ones that are absurd, let's say. And this is where we move forward, and how you create order out of chaos, which is this quantum state that this photon is in at this point. So this is the fundamental building block of the universe to me is a photon. Before that, you just have pure vibrations, pure information, but that is not structured. The first structure is the torus, and the reason why it's that and not anything else is not because of spin or whatever, Einstein or gravity or whatever. It's just a strategy to avoid superposition. Superposition or symmetry. That's all. Once you get that, now you have a very interesting building block. What happens? this photon actually splits into, you could say that that's where the ego is created, into several photons that have one specific state. Like, for instance, this one will say, well, I'm going to be blue. I'm going to be the color blue. And this one says, I'm going to be the color red. I'm going to be ultraviolet, UV. I'm going to be X-rays. And then there is interaction that is possible now between those photons. And the universe sort of sorts out the rules that apply to the interactions between photons to sort of filter out what's absurd and from what is harmonious. And guess what happens? This number 12 that comes up very often, and then from that 144, which is 12 times 12. 12 dimensions, 12, 12, 12. Okay, what is that related to? Well, 12 notes on a piano, and how sound how those relate to each other, how the notes relate to each other, and the kind of relationship that they have to each other. With those notes, you can really build something harmonious. So it's as if the photon, by splitting into several photons, which just take on one of the possible states that exists in this one unique photon that just contains all possible states, by testing the interactions between parts of itself, it derives a certain number of rules for how vibrations or how waves should interact with each other, and how that can be a harmonious interaction, and you can build something out of it. You also incidentally have 12 elementary particles. I think they're called elementary particles. I haven't checked, but it's those electrons and all the quarks and stuff. Elementary particles, quarks. In the standard model, there's this number 12 that just comes up all the time. And we haven't apparently found everyone. But this number 12 really represents a key in my mind, in terms of how you can build something out of photons. And then you move to the layer above. Suddenly now you have these 12 elementary particles that exist. The electron, the up, the down, quark. I don't know all of them, but you just open any science textbook and they will show you. But these to me are composed of photons. Inside it's a photon. Inside it's photons that are arranged in a specific way, which gives them specific properties. I guess they're built out of the interactions between all possible states of a photon, and then they can build something more complex than the photon, again, in order to avoid perfect symmetry and superposition, because once this game is over, ultimately, for every photon you also have an antiphoton, because this rule of symmetry that I'm talking about is that it applies across the board. If something exists, like this first vibration, if something exists, then its opposite also exists. And it's only a matter of time that those are reunited, and so the universe creates these strategies to avoid superposition. So, and then the process repeats. These 12 elementary particles, they are there is this idea that was also already formulated by several scientists when they had a glimpse of genius inspiration from, well, in their dreams or whatever. I think one of these scientists says, what if there's only one electron? It's going very, very fast and takes on takes on all of the states of the different electrons in the universe every time there's this sort of iteration of time going by. And he was actually very right. All of these subparticles, again, also contain infinity, and all the possible infinite states, all possible states that they can have. It's not just this Schrödinger thing of the cat is dead or alive. It's actually this electron, its feature, its characteristics cannot be just that of one electron. It's impossible because you can never reduce infinity to less than infinity. If you, for instance, subtract 1000 from infinity, it's still infinity. And so here, because again, in those vibrations, it's infinite, this photon, which may seem like it's only a fraction of all those vibrations, is still infinite. And this, that only breaks, it breaks into all of these possible states, and then those arrange into quarks and stuff, but it's still infinity. You cannot reduce infinity to anything less than infinity. But then, of course, these 12 elementary particles then also test the kind of interactions that are possible between electrons, up, down, protons, I guess, I don't know, all of them, neutrons. They just test the interactions between each other. And what happens to be created? The hydrogen atom, which is the first atom, which contains just roughly only one of each, according to what and it's just one electron, I think. I haven't revised my chemistry lately, but I think hydrogen is like the most primary atom and element. And so all of this basically here, you could say that all of this is chaos, pure chaos, that of, just basically subparticles that haven't managed to find the rules, again the rules, of a harmonious interaction between all of them to create something bigger than the sum of their parts, an atom. And it's the same story all over again. And from this hydrogen atom, same process repeats. What characteristics does this hydrogen atom have? All of them. And it tries to find a solution to, and it splits in between all its possible states, then creates interactions between itself and see what can be done. And what can be done is a star. And that's one way that hydrogen atoms can sort of interact in a way that doesn't create a circular story and something new that is created. And all of the elements after that, helium, lithium, oxygen, carbon, all of the elements are forged inside stars. And so if you really want to have a glimpse at the structure of the universe, the way that I see it is that you have photon, the particles, elementary particles, you have the atom, you have star, you have molecules, molecules, you have the living cell, you have humans, living cell, humans, You have, I don't even know how to display this, but collective consciousness, which we would call ETs, perhaps even angels, maybe, who knows, ... How fast did these ideas appear? These building blocks, as I call them, how fast? Again, this photon appears from pure void in the random interaction between waves that appear in the void infinitely fast. And if they appear infinitely fast, then the photon appears infinitely fast. And then how long do you think it takes for the photon, once its infinite possible states sort of incarnate, or sort of, well, I would say incarnate, and test the interactions between its different states? How fast do you think that it comes up with the idea of subparticles? Infinitely fast. And how fast do you think the particles, the subparticles, which of course again have all possible states, and then test the interactions between each other, how fast do you think the hydrogen atom appears? Infinitely fast. And so what you get is that, and this is why I like to think of this Einstein's theory of relativity, what sits inside the singularity of a black hole is these ideas, which actually are all tied together like a sort of a DNA. You'd think that there's like this DNA inside this black hole, or the ultimate structure of all of these ideas, and all the rest, which is an outward holographic projection, are the stories that take a little less time, relatively speaking, a little more time, relatively speaking, to manifest the next idea. So out of, well, here it is an example, out of an infinite number of atoms that test all of the possible states, the first star appears instantly, but then all of the other stars, which are the ones in our solar system with their planets and everything, they appear a little less fast, relatively speaking, to this first star, relatively speaking. And they sort of take a little more time from, this state of infinite potential to get to the next idea. And so you might think that you might see this as an unavoidable kind of process where you have different civilizations like Pleiadians or Arcturians that are, you could say that the farther off you are from this main idea, there are stories that take more and more and more and more time, relatively speaking, to bridge the gap between this idea of the human and this idea of humans acting as a collective in a collective consciousness that is, aware of itself. Let's put it that way. A bit the same process as a baby that's born and finally it opens its eyes, it starts to hear things, there's starting to be input to its five senses, new data and stuff that allows it to build an ego and an awareness. And so it's almost as if these ideas exert a form of attraction on what we would call the past, but it's not really the past. It's just potential or energy that takes a little bit more time, relatively speaking, to build the next harmonious or coherent or orderly idea that allows for a harmonious interaction between these building blocks. And so you could think that Earth 3D is being, encouraged and loved and admired by all the other races which have done this same process, because we are so far, probably so far off from this main kind of point of attraction that for some of the races that are, for instance, very close and to bridging this gap between being a bipedal humanoid kind of species and understanding that they should function as a collective consciousness, here it happens infinitely fast. Here it happens a little bit less fast than infinitely fast, which would be maybe say 10 years in our scale. Maybe here it's 1,000 years, and maybe here it's 1 million years, who knows, for Earth. And so the farther off you get, away from this process, and how fast that goes, basically, it's almost if there's a black hole and things are being attracted by it, the farther away you are from the black hole, the longer the journey, and the more sort of potential for mishaps along the way. Like you could be hit by an asteroid, or things could sort of swerve out of control. And so you could say that these other civilizations, indeed, they kind of knew. They never were cut off from source. They always kind of had this intuition, because they were very close to the next idea, very close to the next point of attraction in this kind of, closer to the singularity, you could say. And we're very far off, and so we forgot completely. The way the universe works then, if you really think about it, and why I'm saying that an entire universe exists, an entire photon, is that everything is built out of photons. We are living light. Many spiritual teachers say this as if it's obvious, but it's just one photon that builds structures above itself. But ultimately, if you go back to the very first thing that I've drawn, don't forget that this is a process where all of this information that is above, all of these things that are built above on top of the photon, is just information. And so ultimately, all of this goes back to source, or back to the photon, I would say, and just changes the information that's inside, and adds information, or adds vibrations which represent just sort of a rearrangement or a structure or a form to pure potential. It's almost just like a sorting mechanism. Like I said, it's like a giant puzzle where what's added as information is information on how to complete that puzzle. The puzzle's already there. All the images exist, like I said. All the images exist. All the different frames of reality exist, but they don't have meaning. They don't have meaning. That is also one of the great answers and mysteries, is that, does life have a meaning? Well, yes, because we give it meaning. If we weren't there, then life would not have meaning. It would just be everything that it just exists and blah. So when humans struggle with what is the meaning of life, it's whatever meaning we give to life. That is why we were created ultimately, is as a sort of a way to sort out, or to give meaning, or to give form, or to give continuity, or to give experience to everything that could possibly ever exist, and to say, well, you know what, out of all that exists, you can disregard a reality where every single pixel of reality, which is made of photons, is just a random color, and that to us doesn't have any meaning. But a meaning where I give a kiss to my loved one, that is a frame of reality which is actually enjoyable, great, and that's the information that you get to keep. So what, in more concrete terms, so you have this one photon, okay? It has vibrations inside of it. And all of the layers above just simply send back information to that one original photon and add information on the new forms or the new ways of sorting all the potential vibrations that exist. And how do you imagine that happens? Well, this is what's kind of mind-boggling here, is that if you have a certain vibration, for instance, let's imagine a very basic vibration like this, where this is considered positive energy, this is negative energy, because of course it has to be symmetric, we have to create both. And they exist because they are not in phase, which means that if you slide this over here, you get this sort of circle of nothingness, and this cancels itself out and it becomes flat again, so there's nothing. So one way to say that, one way to explain why reality exists and why vibrations were chosen over anything else is that you can have this alternation between plus and minus, which are asynchronized, and therefore never really cancel each other out. And that is a strategy which again is only temporary, because then there's another wave that comes like this. Anyways, let's say that's inside the photon. How do you add information to this? Well, how about if you take a little bit of the energy of this original wave and just transform it into a wave inside a wave, a vibration inside a vibration. How about if you do this? So it's almost as if this line here that it serves as the basis for this vibration. Now you posit that this is a line that serves a basis for a vibration. You basically say that you decide that this is now flat, and you add a vibration to that. So this vibration doesn't exist anymore, this big one, and only this new one exists. And notice that this new one includes the big vibration. It still follows its pattern, but there's new information included inside of it. And you can do the same thing here. You can add a vibration to that vibration. And then you can do the same with this one. You can add vibration or information to that vibration. And so what you get is this nested logic. That is how I explain how everything can be just within this one source, within this one photon. You can have, you can break down a vibration into infinity. You can zoom in infinitely in here and create another vibration. You can add an infinite amount of information to this first initial vibration, which is very basic. And then consciousness then can be restricted to just one tiny little part inside this huge vibration, this global. And the information, of course, is accessible from this point of view instantly, which is why you can explain that if your consciousness is now focused on this tiny little part of this one global vibration or energy, and you want to teleport here, which may represent the future, the past, another part of the universe, whatever. If you look at it from here, it's very easy, to shift your consciousness. I'm doing it right now. I just zoomed out, and now, you just shift your focus, and now you're here. If you're inside the holographic reality, that is just a projection on the outside, of what is inside that photon, as far as information, then it's very difficult. Then you have to sort of travel along the wave. You know, this is like, imagine that this right here is, I'm going to use different colors because it's becoming hectic. Imagine that this right here is the moon, and oops, and this right here is planet Earth. Well, the information about what's on planet Earth at any given point in time is in this part of the vibration, and the moon is here. Well, if you want to travel to the moon, then you can either sort of jump there by taking the perspective of me drawing here, and you can just say, okay, I'll just shift my consciousness to being here and tweak the vibration here to add myself on the moon. Or you can just travel along the vibration according to the set rules that you have in 3D, whatever, and then get to the moon this way and then go back. So, I mean, this is still something that I'm thinking about a lot, because it's very hard to grasp that the entire reality that we see, the entire universe we see, can be contained in just one single photon, and it's just about rearranging or sorting the information which it already contains, because it already contains infinity, as you've seen from the previous images that I've drawn in the slides. It already contains infinity, except it's all a big mess. And so you can just rearrange and sort out the vibrations that are in there, and add that one to this one, and just sort them out so that it makes more sense. Just like if you had a movie and you scramble all of the frames inside a giant big bowl, you cut them up and you put them there, doesn't make sense. And then what Source does is that it incarnates itself into the various slides of the movie, and then asks, that's how basically it reconstitutes the movie by experiencing those slides and saying, oh, this one I guess is related to this one, so let's put it here, and let's put that one here, and then let's put this one over here. You see? So it sorts itself. We are a sort of a sorting mechanism for infinity, and of course it's not only just about sorting, it's also about finding a way to not have circular stories, because those forms cancel themselves out, because infinity is at the same time zero and infinity, or nothing and everything. And in order to break out of those states and experience something, it creates these forms, more and more evolved forms, which is the photons, the elementary particles, the atom, and everything. And the way that I picture it is simply adding information to this one original vibration continuously into infinity. And you could think of that as the dimensions. And this is why also I don't really like this low versus high vibration, because you could say that the lowest vibration, which is this one, this big one, it's very slow, it's very low, quote unquote. It contains within it all of the high vibrations. It's all nested one inside the other. There's no separation, which is why there's also this idea in the spiritual realms that you are already, ascending, you're already whatever. It's because, yes, indeed, at this time, if, for instance, your consciousness is focused on this wave and not the big one, then you're experiencing something. One set of reality, one set of experiences. But that one contains the smaller one. And so you can also shift your focus now to the smaller one instead of the bigger one. And then you get it in another experience of reality. And it's not good or bad, it's just shifting your perspective, shifting your point of consciousness, what you want to focus on. And of course, if you look at all the other videos that I've made, the principle here is, can you create harmony? Can you sort of sort this out, or are you just going to create more of a mess inside of infinity, inside of this photon? That's all. That's all that you're required to do. If you think of a more pragmatic example, like your own living cells, are you a red blood cell, which does its job? Or are you a cancer cell, which sucks up too much energy, multiplies uncontrollably, and threatens the body? This is chaos. This is order. You always have a mix between the two, but ultimately you still have to have a very good balance, otherwise you'd be dead. And if you think about the way that humans behave, in many respects we behave like diseases towards each other. I mean, not even towards the environment, but towards each other, as autoimmune diseases, which is a metaphor for war. One set of cells in your body attacked other cells in your body, or like cancer cells, like certain people that amass a lot of the body's energy and suck up all the resources for themselves, multiply uncontrollably, and take in more and more and more of the body's resources until the body dies. You can think of the ultra rich as being that, and that's it's not that it's good or bad. It's just that from the point of view of you as an individual, cancer is bad because you're going to die if you have cancer. But from the point of view of your living cells, for them it might not really matter. Your body will just decompose, and all of your living cells will have their own experience in their own life as that happens. Now imagine that this one body is our collective consciousness. From its point of view, if we have war, it's a problem, because it's as if its right hand was hitting its left hand. It's pretty stupid. From our point of view, we're like, oh, what's the big deal? There'll be other humans to replace those that are dead, and whatever. So again, it's not judgmental or problematic that we have war. It's just that if you're in that frame of mind, if you're in that level of consciousness and you find that that's not problematic, then you're just going to be stuck at the level of where is it? Here. You're just going to be stuck in this level right here, and you won't go to the collective consciousness level. That's all. And there's room for you here. There's like this space of chaos where humans still kill each other and eat animals and whatever, and destroy their environment. That's totally fine. Just like there's a space here of chaos where atoms bump into each other and create nuclear reactions that blow them to bits and pieces back to subparticles, and then they recompose again into atoms, and this into infinity. And that's fine, because in infinity, all of that happens. It's just that if you're tired of this, then there is a way out, and it's here. To behave as a collective consciousness, to wake up as a collective consciousness, and keep on exploring infinity, keep on experiencing new and new things. If you're not tired of this, fine, you can stay there as long as you want, because in infinity there is no problem, there is no limit of time. I think I've said basically everything I wanted to say. I hope it's clear, this idea that the whole universe may actually be contained within this one single photon. And the multiverse theory is, of course, that in this infinite space where you have infinite number of vibrations and waves, there are several photons that may appear at different points, and maybe sometimes maybe you will get to meet another photon that has another kind of structure that it has found, and those two maybe at some point will connect like two neurons inside your brain, and thereby also again help the universe and infinity to explore itself. And that can be an infinite process as well. And of course, all of this is extremely far from our human experience. And this is why sometimes when I say all of these things, it's best to keep it real, keep it at a level which is understandable to us and relatable to us as humans, and not be too worried even if this theory, this idea or this theory may be appealing, interesting, whatever you want. It's brain candy. I think Dolores Cannon was saying this, brain candy. It's nice to chew on this and create wild philosophies about this and say, oh great, now I understand this whole vibration within a vibration and everything. Ultimately, it doesn't help you so much to live your daily lives. And this is what happened to me basically, is that yes, I had all these revelations. I flew very high up into the planes of consciousness and to get these kind of universal truths, because that's what I was interested in. That's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know the truth with a big capital T, And ultimately what you find is when you get to that truth, it throws you right back into your reality and the daily life. Like, how do you behave with regular people? What do you do with your children, with your work, with your food, everything. And it puts pressure, it adds pressure to a certain extent. Like you're thinking, okay, if I want to get out of this chaotic situation, I better work on all stuff. And it also relieves pressure. It also relieves pressure because ultimately, once you understand that this is a natural process, then there's nothing really to fear. And if you don't do it in this lifetime, you'll do it in the next. There's no deadline, there's no hurry. It's just about your own personal evolution, and you can take as long as you want. And it's related to, again, you're thrown back to your own wisdom as an individual and making your own decisions, because for some people this may be torture right here on earth. For others it may be awesome. And it's just like, let's say this series Game of Thrones. It's the same thing. You have some people that found it awfully long. They would have just liked a quick shortcut, a few battles, like just make it fit in one movie and then be done with it. And then others that were delighted of, the cliffhangers and the fact that it took 8 years, and that you could really discuss and appreciate and how should I say, savor every moment and enjoy every moment to the fullest. And then the waiting was also part of the whole excitement. and for others it was terrible. And so you're back to your own wisdom and intuition and everything, and trying to figure out, well, what do you prefer? What do you prefer? Do you like these kind of movies where it goes fast, or do you want them slow, where the plot sort of takes a long time to develop, or do you want this accelerated? Oh, I know I'm God. I know it's a collective consciousness. Boom, I'm it. And you haven't had time to experience much along the way. There's no medieval ages. There's no burning witches. There's nothing. You sort of are born to a certain world where there is this innate wisdom that you are part of Source, and that the next step is this collective consciousness, and boom, you do that. And to a certain extent, I'm wondering if Atlantis and all of these other civilizations that we hear about, where they had these kind of psychic powers, crazy psychic powers to fly, to materialize things with their thoughts and all of that, isn't a reflection of the fact of being born immediately super aware of their true nature to a certain extent. So some like it fast, some like it slow, and back to you. What do you want for yourself? And just take it easy, because our situation here, as I said, I think is quite exceptional and difficult compared to other civilizations. I believe in according to this model. So just a quick recap then, a few things that still need to be pointed out, I feel. What's happening here? First of all, you don't get rid of anything. For some reason, some people think that we're just going to leave our bodies, or that we're not going to be quote-unquote human anymore. But as you see, with these vibrations nested one inside of the other, you're actually integrating these things. So once you've fully integrated the fact of being human, and the human, for instance, is this the green vibration, the circling green, then you have access to the red vibration, which is something beyond. And this nested logic is very important to understand, because in our own bodies you will find all of these layers. Where is this? All of the layers of disable this. All of these layers, whether it's photons, particles, atoms, molecules, living cells, all of them are a part of being human. They didn't disappear. It's just that within our bodies, they're not in this chaotic state. Otherwise we wouldn't exist. So first of all, it's not about rejecting our humanness. It's about integrating it fully. And once you've integrated all of the lower, quote unquote, vibrations, then you have access to the higher ones. So it's almost like, think about it as a piano scale, where you have these notes and octaves of higher dimensions. Once you've mastered the lower octaves and you know how to play those correctly, and you've sort of tuned them in order to play in a harmonious way in those lower notes, then you can add new octaves, or new notes to your keyboard. But not until you've fully mastered and tuned and play in tune or in a harmonious way the keys of the lower vibrations. So it's kind of, well, not a warning, but just pay attention to qualifying low as being evil and high as being good, because that sets you on, to me at least, a dead end as far as the ascension process or whatever. It's not seeing this as it really is, and it might get you stuck actually in the human experience or the human lower vibrations. Another thing that was interesting that I was seeing lately on my feed, and of course, once you expand your consciousness, as you expand it, you get access to information that is more and more in tune with what you think, which is, again, these synchronicities happen to me more and more often as I as I explore new ideas, or as I sort through what I'm thinking and what I believe in. Then suddenly articles that confirm the things that I believe start popping up in my feed or in my reality, be it my Facebook or whatever. And here is this interesting theory of quantum Darwinism, which, if you read it, it's actually very close to this whole brainstorm that I've just done, and trying to explain how, from a sort of quantum superposition where everything exists, you get something coherent and something linear. And here, this physicist, Wojciech Zurek, I don't even know how to pronounce that correctly, maybe I just did, but who knows, proposes that it's by interacting with its environment that causes this decoherence of the quantum state and becomes something that is observable and linear and continuous. So indeed, if you go back to what I was explaining, it is this split between all potentials into one potential, which then interacts with itself, which creates the rules, which then allow for giving a new form to further the experience. And I guess a final thing that I wanted to say is the universe's expansion that we witness, to me, is simply the number of experiences of order. It's basically order eating up chaos. So it's as if the universe wanted to expand more and more and experience more and more all of these different layers, and it eats up, oh God, and it eats up the bubbles, the infinite chaos. It sort of nibbles on the infinite chaos that can, and in each of these layers. So out of this, let's say there's a chaotic state, there's a big potential of chaos here where hydrogen atoms still bump into each other, and that chaos is infinite. Now the orderly interaction between hydrogen atoms there is finite. And that grows. And it expands into infinite chaos. And finite, I mean finite as in our universe finite, which is still immense. But what I mean is the void, quote unquote, onto which the universe expands is simply nibbling on chaos and then expanding and and sort of spreading order into infinite chaos. So as new stars are born, new galaxies are born, it's just that there are a certain number of hydrogen atoms that align with this idea of a star, and then that can manifest as a new galaxy or a new solar system, whatever. And what it means is that there's part of this chaos now that is aligned with this idea of a star and is now inside our finite universe. So yes, the universe expands, and it expands basically based on even what I'm doing just now. Like for instance, all of these ideas that I'm pushing around are increasing the coherence of the human, will contribute for this expansion of consciousness and the expansion of aligning us with this collective consciousness and the ascension process, which basically means that we are also pulling out of chaos all the potential experiences that do align with order inside our universe. So it's the experience that expands the universe. The experience of a sort of a perfect balance between chaos and order. And we're just, the universe is just basically, and Source is just playing at finding all the possible stories here that lead from one idea to the next, where there is experience. And these ideas, though, don't need to be experienced, they already exist. But what I think happens also is that the experience itself tweaks these ideas. There's this feedback loop that I explained in the fractal universe, is that even though these rules appear instantly, as I explained, infinitely fast, the experience between those ideas tweak them and allow them to add new information, like new DNA, new variations that sort of enrich these building blocks and allow for even more experimentation, which is in line with this idea that infinity is infinite. So sorry for the lengthy video. I hope you found it interesting, and see you in the next one.